The music that drifted through the hall felt like it came from somewhere far away, as if the violins were underwater. I stood just inside the doorway, bouquet trembling in my hands, staring at the world I had spent months building in my mind. Crystal chandeliers rained down light in perfect golden cones, and hundreds of candles flickered on the tables like a field of stars. Guests leaned toward one another whispering, dresses swishing, glasses clinking. Everything was perfect, the kind of perfect that you photograph, post, and envy, except for the way my chest felt hollow and tight, as if some part of me already knew. Amir and I had been through so many seasons together. We'd met at university, where he sat in the back row sketching city skylines while everyone else typed notes. He was tall, careful with his words, and he had a smile that broke through shyness like sunlight through clouds. When he finally noticed me, it was over spilled coffee and shared deadlines. For years after graduation we worked side by side, planning a life that was supposed to be sturdy and kind. When he proposed under the old banyan tree near my parents' house, he slipped the ring on my finger with such steady hands. I'd believed it was a promise carved into the roots of my own childhood. Even now, standing in the wedding hall, that memory flickered at the edge of my mind like a film on repeat. Earlier that morning had been a blur of hairspray and prayers. My best friend Minal had fussed over every detail of my dress, smoothing wrinkles that weren't there, pinning the veil so gently I hardly felt it. "Breathe," she'd whispered. "This is your day." My mother had pressed a cool palm to my cheek and murmured verses of blessing, her eyes bright with a mix of pride and fear. I had looked at myself in the mirror, ivory lace hugging my shoulders, the train like a silver river behind me, and thought, this is it. All the heartbreaks and long nights had led here. I would walk down the aisle and begin a new chapter with the man who had been my friend, my partner, my almost everything. But as soon as I stepped into the hall, I saw him. Amir stood at the altar, his suit sharp, his tie exactly the shade of midnight we'd chosen together. He smiled when our eyes met, but the smile didn't settle. It flickered, restless. His gaze darted around the room as if scanning for something, or someone, else. My stomach clenched. I told myself weddings are nerve-wracking, that grooms can be anxious too. I forced my lips into a smile and took a step forward. Then I saw her, Sana. The name alone was a whisper from his past, a girl whose stories he'd told with a soft nostalgia, how they'd raced bicycles down the same street as kids, how she'd been the one person he confided in before we met. I'd heard the name enough times to build a picture, but I'd never imagined her standing here, inside our wedding hall. She wore a gown so similar to mine it felt like a cruel echo, ivory satin, delicate beading, but with a daring open back and a train even longer than mine. Her hair was swept into the same kind of chignon. Even the bouquet in her hands was a mirror of mine. For a dizzy second I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks. Guests were whispering, tilting their heads from me to her and back again. I forced myself to move forward, my veil trembling. Every step down the aisle felt like walking on ice. My heart tried to hammer its way out of my ribs. Amir's eyes flicked to Sana again and again. He swallowed hard, adjusted his cufflinks, licked his lips. I gripped the bouquet so tightly the stems cracked under my fingers. The officiant's voice boomed, calling for us to begin. We stood facing each other. His hands were warm but damp when he took mine. The officiant began the vows, a litany I'd rehearsed in my head 100 times. I spoke my lines on autopilot, my voice a whisper over the music. When it was his turn, Amir's voice trembled. He stumbled over a phrase, recovered, but the rest of the words came out thin, as though each one cost him effort. His eyes flicked over my shoulder, back to Sana, then down at our joined hands. I told myself, just finish the vows, it's nerves, it's nothing. My pulse pounded in my ears. And then, without warning, he let go of my hands. It was a small movement, but it echoed like a gunshot. Before anyone could understand, he stepped away from me, walked straight to Sana, cupped her face in both hands, and kissed her. Right there under the chandelier, with my ring heavy on my finger, in front of our families, our friends, our photographers. The room gasped. Someone dropped a glass. My father half rose from his seat, my mother covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Minal made a sound between a sob and a scream. Time warped. I saw details with painful clarity. A petal falling from a centerpiece, the flicker of a candle, the smudge of lipstick on Sana's mouth as she leaned into him. In that suspended moment, everything I thought I knew unraveled. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. My body went very still, as if some deeper part of me had been waiting for this. Slowly, carefully, I slid the ring off my finger. It came away easily, like it had been waiting to leave. I placed it on the altar, a tiny circle of metal gleaming under the lights. I turned on my heel and began to walk down the aisle alone. Each step felt like dragging chains but also like shedding them. The whispers rose behind me. Cameras clicked but no one dared to move. My train trailed after me, snagging on chairs, catching on shoes. Someone called my name, maybe me now, maybe my mother, but the sound blurred. Outside the doors the sky had opened, rain pouring down in sheets. It soaked my hair, plastered the dress to my skin until it felt like a costume I could peel away. My bouquet slipped from my fingers and rolled into the gutter. I didn't run. I walked, head high, even as tears burned hot on my cheeks. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't stay there. The doorman stared at me as if at a ghost. A taxi slowed at the curb, its driver gawking at the drenched bride waving him down. I climbed in, the veil torn by the wind, mascara streaking black rivers on my face. "Where to?" the driver asked. I opened my mouth but no words came. Finally I whispered my own address. The car lurched forward. Streetlights blurred into long smears of gold on the wet pavement. My phone buzzed with calls, unknown numbers, relatives, Amir's name flashing again and again. I turned it face down on the seat and stared out the window. My reflection in the glass looked older, sharper, almost unrecognizable. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and breathed slowly until the city softened into darkness. At home I fumbled with my keys, the door stubborn against my shaking hands. Inside, the apartment was dim and silent, smelling of old books and lavender cleaner. I closed the door behind me and slid down to the floor, the wet dress pooling like a broken wave. Only then did I sob, great heaving sounds that seemed to tear from somewhere beneath my ribs. I pressed my palms to my face but the tears kept coming. Hours might have passed. The sky outside shifted from slate to a bruised orange with the setting sun. Days blurred after that. I left the dress draped over a chair, veil still attached, like an abandoned ghost. I shut the curtains. I deleted social media. I refused to answer questions from family, from journalists, from friends who didn't know what to say. Shame burned hotter than anger. How could I have missed the signs? How could my world have collapsed in front of hundreds of people? I replayed the moment again and again, the flicker in his eyes, the way her dress matched mine, the kiss under the chandelier. It haunted me even in sleep. And yet, somewhere under the rubble, a voice inside whispered, "You're still here. You survived." That whisper was faint but steady, like a heartbeat. Each morning I woke, sat on the edge of the bed, stared at my bare finger. The ring was gone, but my hand was still my own. The woman in the mirror was pale, eyes ringed with shadows, but she was still breathing. The evening of the fourth day I stood in the kitchen with a mug of tea, staring at the rain streaking the window. The city moved on without me, buses honking, vendors shouting, neon signs flickering. Life hadn't ended. Something inside me shifted. I was not just a bride abandoned, I was a woman waking up. I didn't know what the next chapter would be. I only knew I couldn't stay hidden forever. My phone buzzed on the counter again, Amir, leaving another voicemail. I let it ring out. Outside, the rain eased to a drizzle. The clouds broke for a moment, revealing a strip of sky the color of copper. I took a deep breath, set the mug down, and walked to the window. My reflection stared back, hair tangled, dress replaced by an old sweatshirt, but eyes a little clearer than yesterday. That was the moment part one ends. Me standing at the window, city lights flickering, bare finger pressed to the glass, the sound of rain fading. The viewers are left not only with heartbreak but with the first glimmer of defiance, an image of a woman at the edge of something new, not knowing yet what it is, but knowing she will get there. The screen fades in from black to the same woman at her window, rain streaking the glass, her bare finger pressed against it. The narrator's voice leans in softly but firmly. "You saw how she walked away from her own wedding. But what happens after the dress comes off, after the phone stops buzzing, after the world forgets the scandal? This is what she did next, and why she's never been the same since." The camera pulls back. The apartment is still small, but light begins to filter in. That's the hook for the second chapter. Viewers lean forward, wondering how she will rebuild her life from the ruins. The first week after the wedding felt like wading through syrup. I moved slowly, slept too much, forgot to eat. When I finally dragged the dress from the chair to hang it in the closet, it smelled of rain and roses gone stale. I couldn't throw it away yet, but I couldn't look at it either. I tried once to listen to Amir's voicemail, but his voice cracked halfway through the apology and I slammed the phone down. That night I dreamed of the chandelier crashing to the floor, shards flying like birds. I woke up with my heart pounding and a strange sense of relief. The dream was violent, but at least it was mine. On the 10th morning I opened the curtains. The sunlight hurt my eyes. The city was moving again. Buses roaring, schoolchildren shouting, shopkeepers lifting their shutters. Life didn't pause for my grief. I poured myself coffee and took it to the window. For a long time I just stood there, sipping, watching people who didn't know my name cross the street. I whispered to myself, "You're still here." It sounded like a lie and a promise at the same time. I started walking in the park at dawn. The first day I barely made it around once, my sneakers old and my breath shallow. An elderly woman with a terrier nodded at me. "Your eyes are tired," she said without preamble. "Walk enough, they'll clear." She didn't know me, but her words settled somewhere inside. I went back the next day, and the next. Slowly my legs remembered how to carry me. Money was running low. I'd left my job months earlier to plan the wedding, expecting to return after the honeymoon. Now there was no honeymoon, no plan. I saw a flyer at the park about a community center looking for part-time art instructors. I almost threw it away. Then I thought of Amir sketching in the back of class, of my own neglected sketchbooks stacked in the closet. I called the number. They hired me for 2 afternoons a week. The community center smelled of glue and hope. The kids were loud, messy, full of questions. They didn't care about gossip or betrayal. They only cared if I showed up and helped them mix colors or find the right brush. Their laughter stitched me back together one day at a time. On the 3rd week a boy named Imran handed me a crumpled drawing of a bird breaking out of a cage. "It's you," he said shyly. I almost cried. Meanwhile Amir kept trying. Texts, emails, voicemails. At first apologies, then excuses, then pleas. It wasn't what it looked like. I was confused. "We can still fix this." I never replied. But at night, alone, I wondered if he was telling the truth. Sometimes I held the phone and imagined calling back. But then I pictured the chandelier, the kiss, my ring sliding off. I put the phone down. 6 months passed. The wedding dress hung in the back of the closet like a ghost. I started attending therapy. My therapist was a quiet woman with silver hair who asked me questions no one else did. What do you want for yourself, not for anyone else? No one had ever asked me that. At first I didn't know how to answer. Then I wrote a list in a cheap notebook: travel, finish my own art, volunteer, learn to drive out of the city. Each tick on the list was a small rebellion. I felt awkward, even guilty, doing things just for me, but the guilt faded faster each time. On a rainy afternoon in early spring, while I was setting up paints at the center, Sana walked in. I didn't recognize her at first. Her hair was limp, her eyes rimmed red. She wore a plain coat instead of satin. "I'm not here to fight," she said quietly. "I just wanted to see you." I froze, brush in hand. The children had gone home. The room smelled of tempera paint and wet coats. "Why?" I asked. She took a step closer but kept her hands at her sides. "Amir told me everything. He's been spiraling. He lost his job. He blames himself." Her voice cracked. "He thought he was in love with me. I thought I was saving him. But it was never real. He's miserable now." I stared at her, surprised at the flicker of pity rising in me. "That's between you and him," I said finally, wiping my hands on a cloth. "I'm not his anchor anymore." Sana's lip trembled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Then she turned and left. I stood by the window and watched her walk away, the rain blurring her shape until she vanished. For the first time since the wedding, I smiled, not because she suffered, but because I realized I didn't care. The tether between us had dissolved. I was free. A month later the community center hosted an exhibition of the kids' art. They asked me to hang one of my own paintings. I hesitated. The last canvas I'd touched for myself was half finished under my bed, a jumble of red and gray. That night I stayed up until dawn, painting a woman walking out of a burning hall, barefoot but upright, her veil trailing like wings. When I hung it at the exhibition, the crowd loved it. Parents took pictures. Children pointed. A local gallery owner approached me, offering to feature my work. My hands shook as I took his card. After the exhibition, I walked home along the bridge where Amir had proposed years before. The city lights flickered on the water like scattered coins. I stopped in the middle, leaning on the railing. My bare finger felt light in the cool air. I whispered to myself, I choose me. The words felt strange but solid. Therapy continued. My list grew longer. I took a weekend trip to the coast, just me and my sketchbook. I walked barefoot on the sand, collected shells, watched the sunrise without taking a single photo. I thought of the girl in the wedding dress, rain pouring down, and wanted to tell her, you will not be this broken forever. You will stand again. You will even laugh. Back in the city, people began to talk less about the scandal. New gossip replaced old. I saw Amir once across a crowded street. He looked thinner, older. Our eyes met for a second. He raised a hand, half a greeting, half a plea. I turned away and kept walking. My heart didn't race. It didn't even ache. It just beat steadily, like it had remembered its job. At the community center, my students planned another exhibition. They begged me to travel with them to a regional contest. I agreed. We took a rattling bus through green hills, the children singing off-key. In a small town hall they displayed their paintings. One of them won a prize. I cheered so loudly I lost my voice. That night in the hostel I lay awake listening to their snores, thinking how strange and beautiful life had become. I hadn't married Amir, but I had built something else, something unplanned, but real. When I returned to the city, the gallery owner called. He wanted to schedule my first solo show. My knees went weak. I said yes. Weeks of preparation followed. Framing canvases, writing captions, inviting people. The night of the show I stood in the middle of the room wearing a simple black dress. People drifted around me, murmuring about color and composition. Some of them knew my story. Some didn't. It didn't matter. My work spoke for itself. Toward the end of the evening a young woman approached me. She looked nervous, clutching a program. I heard what happened to you, she said. And then I saw this painting, the one of the woman walking away. It made me feel like maybe I could leave, too. My boyfriend, her voice trailed off. Tears shone in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I squeezed her hand. In that moment I understood. My pain had been turned into something that could help someone else. The story closes with me boarding a train the next morning, a backpack full of sketches and a ticket to a coastal town where I would teach a summer workshop. As the train pulls away, I look out the window. For a split second, my reflection and the passing scenery merge, and I realize I'm free, not in spite of what happened, but because I walked away. The narrator's voice returns. Sometimes the greatest wedding you'll ever attend is the one where you marry your own life, your own courage. Walking away wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning. The final shot lingers on the train carving through green hills, the sun rising over water. The music swells, not triumphant, but steady and warm. Viewers are left with an image of a woman no longer defined by betrayal, but by the choice to reclaim her life. It's a quiet, inspiring message. Even the deepest public humiliation can become the soil of a new self, if you're willing to walk away and keep walking.